guys? Welcome back. So, today I am messing with the lights a little bit. Um, Also, I'm gonna try to do this without glasses because I feel like my glasses reflect a lot of the light. But without my glasses, you might catch myself squinting a little bit. Although I'm not really reading anything. Like, I don't need my glasses right now. I usually use them to read or watch something electronic like TV, for instance, or a computer screen. But here I am just talking, so should not need them. Should not need them. So, again, like I said, I'm messing with lights. I'm gonna try to have. I guess I'm gonna mess with having a lower light setting. So, as you can see here, it's dark. And I apologize, I had to burp. um, but yeah, really gives you a campfire kind of vibe. So hopefully I don't have any interruptions or anything, but yeah, things are kind of random and I like to do things in one take. I like to do as little editing as possible. But yeah, like just top of the fact that I'm still a noob, but also I don't want to overproduce anything, right? It kind of takes the fun away from it. But today we are going to be talking about my favorite quotes. So these quotes are a bit philosophical. That's that kind of funny, but yeah, they're like feel good or something to think about, kind of thoughts. And yeah, let me know what you think. Of course, I'm gonna be giving my perspective on these things, or just kind of explaining them to how I feel, what they are, what they're trying to say, or how I relate to them myself. Now, like always, you guys could let me know what you think of the light or give me some quotes of your own that you really like. So let's get started. Not sure how long this is going to be. I usually try to aim for at least more than 20 minutes, but we'll see. Also, with the light thing, I'm probably going to do this the whole time. I'm using candles, but the smoke is kind of getting to my eyes. So there's that. Also, you can't really see my face all the way, but here are my arms. You could see me a little bit. I could later make trigger videos with my rings. But, damn, I'm over here trying to fix my glasses. I'm not wearing my glasses. Okay, let's get started, guys. Let me move this paper. I feel really, how I record, I'm kind of stuck together. Like I'm cramped. Anyway, so my little notes here. So the first one, just a disclaimer. I am not necessarily religious, but I grew up religious, so some of these have a religious context. But, I'm not trying to push anything. I am just simply talking. I'm just yapping, if, I don't think I have to give any type of disclaimer. Just, they're just words of wisdom from certain sources, and they're not, necessarily mean to be malevolent or anything. They're just, words of wisdom. But let's get started. So, the first one is by St. Thomas Aquinas, and what he said was, 3 things are necessary for the salvation of man: to know what he ought to believe, to know what he ought to desire, and to know what he ought to do. So, pretty straightforward, right? And he said, for the salvation of man. Well, he's a saint, right? Kind of, word salvation is kind of heavy there for someone of the faith, right? But I I really like that one, you know. Um, I wouldn't, I mean, I wouldn't say replace the word salvation with, but a lot of, you know, words can be put there to kind of push yourself in a certain predicament. You could use it to push yourself forward. So, for instance, sometimes it's going to be pretty imperative. You need to know what to do and what you're doing in life. Now, that doesn't mean that there's going to be times where you don't know what you're doing. Like, everyone has those times, right? They're going to feel lost. And it's okay. Just try to get back on your feet as fast as possible. You know, that's kind of what you need to do. Now, this isn't like, I know someone could just hear that and say, well, yeah, but it's harder than it looks. You know, it's harder than it is, more complicated. And it is, you know. But this one is just simply saying, you need to know what you need to do. And then it goes on, you know, what do you believe? You know, well, do would be the third part, right? But what do you believe also? What are you standing for? What are you doing the things you do for? And of course, you could have a answer right now that says, hey, I'm just getting by to pay the bills or whatever you got to do, right? Maybe you have children you need to provide for. Maybe that's pushing you at this very moment. And that is a decent answer, you know. It's not necessarily a bad one. But life does get complicated. It gets complex, and that we end up having a larger answer sometimes the older we get. You know, I'm not that old myself, but I've certainly seen a lot of things throughout my life. And sometimes you don't know what to believe. You know, sometimes you don't know what to do next. Sometimes the next step that you thought you needed to take isn't even there anymore. So now you're walking and there's nothing in front of you. So what do you do then, you know? Things get tough. Things get tough. But knowing that you need to find what to believe and knowing that you know what to do, or at least getting to the point, that is the point of the message that I like. So the way I see it, it's more like it's not always the destination but the journey kind of thing, you know. Like, as long as you're building towards that, as long as you're building to know what to believe in and what to do and desire. So I set them backwards, right? But I set them in order of which I view immediately, because the last one is desires. So our desires are kind of tricky, because what we want is not always what we need, right? But what we want will sometimes really push us in positive or negative directions. And I'm sorry for that lip sync. But sometimes, you know, we don't know if it's good or bad what we want. It kind of falls in a gray area, and then we're all just in that gray area. It's not an easy answer, you know. So I think that quote for me is something that I really think about sometimes, you know, just like, hey, what am I doing? What am I neglecting necessarily? And yeah, it's just something to think about. Like, maybe we don't have to have that much of a deep thought on it, but you know, sometimes it's the end of the day, it's just a man telling you, like, hey, this is what I think, you know. And in this video, it's just me saying, hey, your thought was pretty cool. Let me read it one more time. I haven't memorized. I don't know why I use notes still, but so once again, 3 things are necessary for the salvation of man: to know what he ought to believe, to know what he ought to desire, and to know what he ought to do. Again, that was by St. Thomas Aquinas. So you could look him up. He's an interesting figure. A lot of these guys are pretty interesting. So, our second one. Now, this one I don't know that much history about. This one's the most recent one I've seen. And this one kind of resonated with me a couple of months ago when I was struggling with my job, which I ended up leaving. But it was a big boy job, and I had responsibilities just adding up, and my pay stayed the same. It was rough. It was rough. But I had enough savings. I had enough resources to kind of be able to let go. But anyway, this one is called the Serenity Prayer, and from what I've read, it is used a lot for AA meetings and 12-step programs. So a lot of people, dealing with addiction, they've probably heard this one before, but it is a very good one, to be honest. I feel, well, I could say that about all of these, right? But yeah, so the Serenity Prayer starts off with, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So, jeez, hits the heart. Oh God. Okay, so that was an ironic phrase, but what I just said right now. But this one hits a bit heavier for me. So I'll say it one more time, probably twice. But God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And the reason that strikes hard with me is because I am known to have a little bit of a savior complex, which in my eyes is sometimes a very positive thing. But if you know what a savior complex is, a lot of times, oof, man, you are going to, if you have it, you're going to be put under pressure, a lot of pressure sometimes, but in your own desire, you're going to want to solve these problems. You're going to want to solve someone else's problems. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes I think it's not a negative thing to do that. But there are times where the person will not change. They will not change their, how could I say, negative outlook or negative traits that keep on putting them in dangerous situations or situations that are not necessarily comfortable. And sometimes you can't really do much to change it. Sometimes, this might be even yourself. If you know you do something repeatedly that is bad and you're aware of it, you have that understanding, but you can't stop it. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes you can't. You feel like there is not much you can do. And this one is probably, I'm going to throw in a bonus quote here because I didn't make it, but I added on to it. And this is just a phrase that I kind of feel goes with this. Not necessarily goes with it, but ties into it a little bit. And I heard this from a video game called Red Dead Redemption 1. So, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but one of the guys says, we can't fight our nature like gravity. We can't fight gravity. And that's something that you just have to accept, right? You accept gravity. When you're on Earth, things fall, right? It's gravity. No one could fight that. No one, a really specific, scientific, controlled environment, you can, right? But for the most part, it's a force of nature that you cannot mess with. You can't do much against. Now, when it comes to our nature as humans, what can we change and what can't we? Like, I was a troubled teen, I would say a preteen. Most of my preteen years were, I was not necessarily an evil kid, but I was a heathen. I was also very nihilistic, and that led me to years of depression. And I mean, I did what I could. I fought and I fought and I fought. And as I got older, I noticed that it was in my nature to fight. You know, in my youth, that fight was physical. And as I got older, it was mental, it was emotional. But it was in my nature to fight. And that's an odd paradox, an odd dilemma, right? You can't fight your nature, but your nature is to fight. So, yeah, sometimes I'm stuck there. Because now my fights are emotional. Granted, they're not nowhere as bad as they used to be. I'm pretty stable now, but, you know, it's just one of those phrases. A video game said that a paradox. I felt the same vibe with that character, you know. What do you do when you can't fight your nature, but your nature is to fight? What do? You're just stuck, and that sucks. So that resonates with this serenity prayer, right? When do you know what struggle is the one you could fight? Like, if the fight is hard, do you give up? Like, when do you know to give up? If you give up too early, you're going to lose it all. But if you keep fighting, the fight never ends. So, it's hard. It's hard sometimes, and this one makes me think like there was some kind of outside intervention or some kind of epiphany to guide me forward, in which I've have, you know, probably later in the video I'll talk a little bit more about personal, but for now this is just you know, quote video, just something, some words of wisdom, not story time per se. But yeah, you know, a lot of us have those epiphanies that push us forward, and this is one of them. Well, one kind of telling you that sometimes you're not going to be able to change something, and the hard part is knowing what you can fight and what you can't fight. So one more time, the serenity prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Beautiful quote. Okay, so now we're going to go a bit more philosophical. So these are from Friedrich Nietzsche, that kind of encompass this, but the first one that I'm going to start with isn't necessarily his, but his work revolved around a lot of this subject. So I would believe is existentialism. So we're going to get a little bit philosophical in here. So this phrase is memento mori, and that simply says in Latin that remember you will die. Now that isn't a threat, you know. It is telling you you will die, you know. Like, you're gonna die eventually. That is something none of us could escape, you know. Death, for some, it will be it's a part of life in some cultures, right? The last stage of life. For some people, it's the end of life, the afterlife, leading to an afterlife. It depends where you're from or what you believe, right? But things for sure, death is coming for all of us. So, oof. But no, this phrase isn't necessarily saying that as a negative, but it is a reminder that things will end. But today you are here. Things will end, and it will not be up to you when it happens. It it will happen. It will happen. I mean, you could do something that is reckless and will lead to you, you know, facing that end early, but in normal cases, death will come for you and you don't get to fight it. So this phrase is just simply saying that. Remember, you will die. But that is not a negative. It's just saying, remember that this will end. And the time you have now is the time you have now. So do what you can with that, right? Kind of leaves that open to interpretation. Now Nietzsche added, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. Nietzsche. I have no idea. He's German. I am not German. But, so, his phrase after the fact of memento mori was amor fati. Now, this one is one of my favorite beliefs of all time, because whenever I'm down or even when I'm happy, I remember, like, I believe in fate a lot. That's the closest thing I have to a religion, although I do like religions. I sometimes find myself going towards Christianity, but I could never go fully. me and the man upstairs, we still have some conversation to do before, I go back. But anyway, fate is, the way I see it, is just something that you cannot control, and it will come to you, almost like your death, right? But fate, Nietzsche had this kind of idea, this way of thinking, that you should love your fate for the fact that it is your fate, and it's kind of odd. Now, if you know Nietzsche, he is considered to be like an edgy kind of philosopher. And you could see kind of why, but I think, like, I personally believe that, it's kind of valid why he feels the way he does, the way he sees things. Like, it's not too edgy. It's just relatively dark. It's not very happy rainbow sunshine kind of things. But a lot of philosophy in this type of area isn't. But another way that he kind of saw these things go together is that everything that you suffer and you lose isn't necessarily bad. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that has happened to you will turn out to be a good thing. Like, this line also says that, you're not gonna get paid let me rephrase that. You're not gonna get something good just because you got a bunch of bad things. Like, that is not a given. That is not predetermined. That is not determined. But what it will do is that at the very least, it is setting you up to kind of understand what the good time will be. So hopefully I'm not misrepresenting his idea, right? But that's kind of the gist of that. Like, accept all the bad, accept the good, because without one, you wouldn't really understand the other. Now, one won't necessarily lead to the other, but it will make you understand it. It will make you get a grasp of what it is to feel pain, what it is to feel happiness, because now you know both. Now you're here and you're experiencing both, and you'll remember that you weren't necessarily happy at one point, you weren't necessarily sad at one point, or maybe you were super sad or super happy, or everything in between, because of those previous experiences. You will understand the one you're likely to have next, whether it be positive or negative. But yeah, it's just something to think about. And he kind of goes on with that line of thought. So let me read you this next part. As this guy talked a certain way, and I'm trying to make it into normal words without, derailing the message. So, one of the ways he described it was, for to love that which is necessary demands not that we love the bad along with the good, but that the two are inextricably linked together. So I mean, kind of what I said right there. They're stuck. You can't fully grasp one without the other. So on a side note, this was kind of what he thought about pain. So in one of the quotes of his books, he said, "Only great pain is the ultimate liberator of the spirit. I doubt that such pain makes us better, but I know that it makes us more profound." So that's kind of what I said, right? That, it's just understanding our human condition. Now, it's not a really feel-good kind of quote, but it does make you, understand the kind of scenario you're in as a human being and feeling your own condition. But again, this is his opinion and my perspective on his opinion. Kind of hard to say what is solid in this type of field. But yeah, like, personally, every time something is getting too difficult or getting kind of difficult, I remind myself that, I've had a lot of wins in life, and I had some losses that sometimes I feel were very, very great, a lot bigger than my wins. But that isn't necessarily true, right? Everyone has a perspective. Like, maybe someone else will look at my wins and be like, dang, like nothing else you can't lose anything that amounts to that win. And it just goes into what you appreciate and what you don't at the moment. And maybe when you're younger, you appreciate some things more or less than when you're older. And that's nature, That's just what it is. And you know how it all connects. We go back to one of the phrases I said earlier, that you can't fight nature. But nature came to you in this sense, right? Of you changed because of certain conditions. Now that change could be negative or positive, but in the long run it could also be negative and positive. Something that starts off terrible may not necessarily be a terrible thing towards maybe a year from the event, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, We don't know. So, in an easy way to say momento morir, amor fati, I guess the modern way to say it would be, it is what it is, and love it. You can't, sometimes you can't do anything. And if you could, and if you tried and it didn't work, you don't know how many tries it would take. You don't know if it wouldn't matter. You don't know when it would start to work. And sometimes it's okay not knowing. Because, who knows? Leave it to fate sometimes. It will play out. And you will do what you gotta do. And it will be what has to be. And it is what it is. That is how I, see that. But yeah, that's a phrase I tend to use a lot. It is what it is. Okay, so our next one is from the Roman poet Horace. I think that's how you say his name, Horace. Because Horus is also an Egyptian god, but that's spelled differently. So Horus, I think. So his phrase was a very simple one that caught on to me, and I saw this in a book. I forgot what the book was called, but I read it when I was like 14. Anyway, the phrase he said was carpe diem, and this one is more of a feel good kind of phrase. I would call this the positive version of momento morir. Now, carpe diem just means seize the day. Now, if you need a reason why, you go back to momento morir, right? Like, seize the day now because, and then you fill in the blank, right? Because fate might throw something else at you, or because you need to remember that you will die. But you seize the day. You seize the day. That it is what it is. You do what you can right now. You do what you can in front of you. You play your cards to the best of your ability. All of us are thrown into the unknown when we are born. Like we just exist out of nowhere. And now we're here. Crazy. So you play with your cards the best that you can. And you do what you gotta do. Now hopefully, I'd like to believe people should do good things. Now the word good, that becomes very hard for everyone to agree on. The more deep you get into the word. But that is a whole different subject. That is probably a later video that we could have a discussion. But I know I don't want to have debates. That's one thing. Like I just want to throw information there and talk about it. Just opening, a form of discussion. Well, probably not even discussion, but just, information. Something to think about. Debates aren't feel good. That is more like proving something right or wrong or just arguing, and it has this place, but that's not what I'm looking for. So I kind of got off on a tangent there, but carpe diem, straightforward. Seize the day. Do what you can today. So, I guess I'll throw in this little bonus thing. I didn't write it here, but my generation, I am like a baby millennial. I'm like towards the last millennial. Because I don't think I'm Gen Z. Those guys are pretty young. Well, I mean, I think the oldest Gen Z now would be like 24, 25 or something. But anyway, around 2010, there was a phrase that a lot of youngsters would say called YOLO. You only live once. Very similar to Carpe Diem. YOLO. Unfortunately, they would do something rather reckless or stupid and or funny before they did it. But just a fun fact, Something millennials know. And Gen Z probably knows also. So now, we move on to Otto von Bismarck. I hope I said his name right. He is also a German dude, but he's probably a good amount older than Mr. Nietzsche. I think this guy's about 80 years older. But he was a prince, he was a duke, he was a count. He did a lot for Germany. Well, there's a lot of regions of Germany, so I might be wrong per se. I think he was Prussian. Anyway, the quote he said was, "Only a fool learns from his own mistakes. The wise man learns from the mistakes of others." So I'll say it again. Only a fool learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. Now, that quote to me sounds a little harsh, but I do like it and I do understand it. It's pretty straightforward. As in, you don't have to fail to learn something was a mistake. You don't have to be the one that takes the fall. Sometimes you do. Not all the time. If you see someone else get burned up by fire, that doesn't necessarily mean you gotta go touch the fire. You witnessed it, right? You saw it. You saw someone getting injured by fire. And now you know not to touch it. You know? Now, if you didn't know in the beginning, then it's okay to be a fool. You know, it's okay. Now, a phrase I like to say, I don't know, don't quote me if this is someone else's, but one that kept with me, that I use on myself, that I made, I think, is that everyone is a fool sometimes. The problem is when you're a fool all the time. Yeah, because we're all in the process of learning something somehow. You know, like, it's okay to be a fool of your learning. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, you've been doing something for a while, then a certain level of expertise should be expected of you. You should expect it within yourself. And yeah, at that point, you probably don't want to be doing foolish things. But it is okay to make mistakes. It is okay to be the fool. Just don't make mistakes all the time for no reason. That is what it says. Well, that's what I'm saying. And the quote is saying, watch others, learn from others. Don't take the fall yourself to receive growth. You don't have to be the one that falls. You could see someone else. It's okay. It's okay to learn from others. Yeah. That one is a bit straightforward, right? So, my last one for today. And this one is from Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was the 32nd president of the United States. So in 1933, he gave this, I think it was in his inauguration speech. So he had been voted in as president. And he said this little excerpt from his speech. So I got the line from it, and it's a very famous line. So he was inspired from another philosopher called Henry David Thoreau. And Mr. Thoreau, of course, he was an American philosopher also, and during the 1800s, philosophy was a pretty big deal. I would think a lot of scholars were into philosophy a lot more than these days now, right? But anyway, the phrase goes, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So when he said this, he was about to introduce a bunch of new social reform programs, and it was a big political change at the time. A lot of things in the U.S. were pretty bad at the time. I think 2 or 3 years passed from the beginning of the Great Depression, so there was a lot of unemployment. There was a lot of people struggling, and that was part of his phrase that he used to calm people down. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that pretty much just means being afraid is more damaging than what you fear. And lots of times, I feel that happens to a lot of us, especially if you're a person that has anxiety or fears social interaction. A lot of times, it's worse in your head. The event itself is not necessarily bad, but the thinking of it is, the thinking, because sometimes you can't control your emotions, right? So that your mind's going to be like, hey, I don't want to do this, it's going to be bad. Now, an obvious case is if you're going to a dangerous place or something, then, maybe you're right, maybe it is bad, maybe it is a bad idea. But a lot of times, it's in your head. Sometimes the fear you feel is worse than what you fear. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just fear itself. grappling you. And when that happens, like, what do? You're scared. You can't do much. But if you let go of that fear, a lot of the times you're gonna be all right. It's all in here, And that's what he portrayed pretty good. He was overall really liked, Now there's a lot of opinions about a lot of presidents, and that's more political, right? That's a different story. But I mean, it worked to calm a lot of people down at the time. And this is a phrase that I don't necessarily tell myself, but I like how good it is because of how it is, Sometimes the fear, it's what's holding you back, not anything else but your own head. Your own head. And where is it? It's in here. Nothing out there. Nothing out there, whether over there or over here. It's in your head. You control your head, control your fear, and you should be fine. But yeah, guys, I think that is it. I might continue with this series. Just some little philosophical talks that kinda could be viewed as a self-help, or it could just be like something to think about, something to dig into. I got into philosophy as a kid, so it was kind of odd, I guess. Not everyone gets into philosophy when they're 11, but for me, I saw it as a way to deal with my emotions at the time. How at the time I didn't know that emotion ended up being depression, but it made me organize my thoughts a lot and kind of think outside the box, try to get new perspectives on things. And it worked, I'd say a lot of philosophy. I contribute a lot of my patience and understanding with people due to philosophy. But there's a lot of philosophers out there. I started with the Greeks and ended up with my favorite, it's Nietzsche and Marcus Aurelius. No, I'll probably say Nietzsche. Aurelius is pretty cool, but Stoicism is here and there. Depends. It depends. But anyway, guys, I will probably see you next week. Yeah, probably next week. At the least, maybe 3 days. At the most, maybe next week. I do have a lot of ideas, but it depends what else is going on. Pretty much, yeah, like if I'm being social that week, if I have a lot of plans with friends, if I've got to work out, because I've been skipping my workouts. But it just really depends how I feel and whatnot, right? But of course, let me know what you guys think. Any, ideas on the conversation we had today. Any feedback with lighting. Like, I'll give you guys an example. Time to break the illusion. So this gave me a kind of a campfire kind of vibe. But so let me know what you think is better, guys. Backlight like that with a candle, or darkness. But yeah, let me know, guys. Let me know. Let me know what your favorite quotes are in the comment section, of course. And I will see you guys next time. So till then,